The Trump administration is back to calling for the impeachment of federal judges that they don't like. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, who is largely responsible for the situation that we're in, has released rare statements throughout the year about how that's not good. For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The process for impeaching a federal judge is the same as the process for impeaching a president. Requires a majority vote in the House and then 2/3 of the Senate, so it doesn't happen often. In fact, it happens basically never. But he's not the first Supreme Court justice who's had to say something like this because Republicans are losing their mind. Peep the date. 1997. In the 90s, the House Republican whip Tom DeLay, who's from Texas, went on a campaign to impeach several federal judges. A lot of his angst came from the Terri Schiavo case, which is a case where a woman who had been in cardiac arrest and a coma was put on a feeding tube. Her husband wanted the feeding tube removed so that she could die. Her parents intervened. A federal judge eventually allowed the feeding tube to be removed and she did die. But he also had a lot of trouble with other cases from federal judges, including some around police reform, etc. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time, William Rehnquist, had to issue a statement. Referencing the failed removal of a Supreme Court justice from the 1800s, he says the Senate's failure to convict him represented a judgment that impeachment should not be used to remove a judge for conduct in the exercise of his judicial duties. He's talking about this guy. In the early 1800s, when Thomas Jefferson was president, the Federalist Party, which was led mostly by John Adams, and the Republicans, or Democratic Republicans, led mostly by Thomas Jefferson, hated each other. I'm talking like violence in the street, brawls, lawfare, very similar to what we're dealing with now. Jefferson and his party came up with the bright idea of just impeaching all the Federalist judges because they didn't like their rulings. They managed to remove Judge John Pickering, a federal judge from New Hampshire, but he was kind of low-hanging fruit because he had a lot of mental health issues. And then they moved on to the Supreme Court. They impeached Justice Samuel Chase, who was an associate justice of the Supreme Court and a Federalist. They got the impeachment through the House, but then the Senate would not convict. And this is important because at the time, the Republicans, or Democratic Republicans, held big majorities in both chambers. So they got the impeachment through, but then once it got to the Senate, even with a Republican majority, the Senate was like, meh. The Republicans in the Senate simply thought that they had gone too far, that their own party had gone too far, that impeaching a judge for his ideology or his rulings and not his behavior outside of that was not okay. So the leader of the party wanted to do a massive power grab, wipe out opposition in the other party using judicial impeachments. His party reined him in. If only this guy had done any of that.